From my childhood, I'd been told that only the strong survive, that the strong will rule, that power is the reward of a virtuous life. I led a virtuous life. I'd mastered the art of fighting. My weapons were an extension of my will. For spiritual power, I studied the ways of voodoo, the rituals of blood sacrifice, to channel the gods and unleash their wrath upon my enemies. I was to wed Keisha, eldest daughter of the Tonko tribe. The marriage of our tribes would have secured my family's control over the ruling class of Amora. The wedding rites were interrupted by my sudden murder. Though my life was taken by bitter treachery, my struggles did not end. Sometimes death is just the beginning.
Acting like you know the way ahead, like you know the rules. There are no rules, man. We're lost.
No. Why, hello there, beautiful people. Don't mind me, I'm just trying to butter you all up to manipulate you into subscribing to my channel and sharing it with everyone you know. Is it working? Let me know in the comments below if my irresistible charms wooed you into doing my bidding. Yes, I know, I'm a terrible flirt. Let's just get on with the video before I embarrass myself further.
Yeah, go.
In today's feature, I will be presenting to you the dark fantasy 1999 action-adventure game called Akuji, the Heartless, which is yet another rare gem released on the PlayStation 1 console. It was developed by Crystal Dynamics, who were also responsible for hit video game franchises like Tomb Raider and the Legacy of Kain series, and published by Eidos Interactive, who are probably best known for publishing the early Deus Ex and Hitman games. The game centers on the voodoo priest and warrior named Akuji, who has his heart ripped out on his wedding day, Mortal Kombat fatality style.
Kano wins. Flawless victory fatality.
And through the use of voodoo magic, is now cursed to wander the underworld. Keisho, his would-be bride, finds him in hell and speaks to him in spirit form. She informs him that it was Orad, his own brother, who orchestrated his murder. She begs Akuji to escape and stop him, as their families are preparing for war, and Orad is preparing to sacrifice her to the gods. Through his travels in the underworld, he is assisted by the Loa Baron Samedi, the god or high spirit of the dead, with whom Akuji is forced to make a deal to pay for his family's sins in past generations. In order to do so, he must collect the souls of his evil ancestors and offer them up to the Baron in exchange for safe passage through the underworld and a chance at returning to the land of the living, saving his bride-to-be and sending his brother to the underworld in his own place instead. Akuji the Heartless features a whole host of voodoo-inspired enemies such as disembodied spirits, warlocks, demons, and zombies, which turns out to be the focus of today's topic.
So remember, kids, if someone offers you drugs, you say no. Unless they tell you it'll give you superpowers. Also meth. That shit's pretty fucking awesome.
Where does one begin with the topic of zombies? I'm sure most, if not all of us, are familiar with the iconic horror movie Monster, especially those of us from South Africa who either work or live in one of our major cities such as Johannesburg or Durban, and who, like myself, may have had the unfortunate experience of encountering these naope or wunga and tik addicted fiends that either come begging for a 2 rand or straight fleece you of your personal belongings, which they will then proceed to sell on their ramshackle black market in order to zombify themselves even more.
Is bad. You shouldn't drink alcohol. And as for drugs, well, drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs.
For those who don't know what I'm talking about, don't mind me. I just had to blow off some steam regarding local South African drug fiends, since I have personally had the bad luck of experiencing some not so friendly encounters with them on multiple occasions. Coming from the province of KwaZulu-Natal, it truly does sometimes feel like a slowly advancing zombie apocalypse is taking place in the heart of Durban City. Anyway, back on track to the actual zombies of modern entertainment, which, like I said, most of us should be familiar with. I'm sure those of you watching in this video have come across films like 28 Days Later, or its sequel 28 Weeks Later, World War Z, or Will Cocksmith's I Am Legend, or the hit TV series The Walking Dead. Or maybe, if you're a gamer like me, you surely have been exposed to video games like the Resident Evil franchise, the Dead Island games, the Left 4 Dead games, Dying Light 1 and 2, the Dead Rising trilogy, as well as the popular DayZ game, and many more I could mention. You surely get the picture by now. The fact of the matter is that all of these games and shows have one thing in common: zombies. The iconic pop culture monster which has taken on many forms since its very first film appearance in 1932's White Zombie. However, it would only be until George Romero's 1968 black and white horror film titled Night of the Living Dead that we would get the concept of the reanimated flesh-eating corpse, and only until the sequel Dawn of the Dead that we would see the concept of a zombie apocalypse or a total collapse of modern society due to said reanimated corpses, much like what is happening in my hometown of Durban City Central in South Africa. The local nyaope addicts, or paras as we call them in Durban slang, may as well be hordes of undead with how stoned out of their minds they usually are.
Ngeke ngisahla i-drugs ngithi ngizobuyela kulabo abantu abathi abangifuni ngoba mina i-drugs ngisalithanda ukuthi ngiboneka nini angeke ngikutshele.
I just want to shake some sense into you kids that are using drugs and thinking about using it. So remember, don't, or else. Okay?
For those who don't know, nyaope or hunga is a South African street drug, which is highly addictive in that it contains large amounts of heroin mixed with cannabis and other crazy ingredients that may involve painkillers, HIV antiretrovirals, and I've even heard of battery acid and rat poison or bug spray being added to the mix in some cases. Now you can see why it has the effect of literally turning someone into a zombie. But enough jokes at the expense of street junkies. In reality, it is an extremely tragic state of affairs, and I personally think that our government and police aren't doing enough to remedy the situation and get these poor kids off the streets and into rehab centers or shelters where they can actually get some help. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. As mentioned earlier, zombies would take on many forms throughout entertainment history, with the earliest depictions being that of the undead individual being a lot more like the reanimated servant or slave as is imagined in real-life voodoo occult practice and religious beliefs, which I will cover a bit more in detail later on. Eventually, as mentioned, we would get the reanimated flesh-eating corpse and also the diseased, mentally insane and violently aggressive zombie that is the result of a viral outbreak, with somewhat early examples of this being in films like Plague of the Zombies from 1966, as well as movies like The Crazies from 1973, also directed by George A. Romero, and two other films like The Omega Man from 1971 and The Last Man on Earth from 1964, which are both based on a novel by American author Richard Matheson, published in 1954, called I Am Legend. And yes,
to answer my question, yeah.
The movie I Am Legend, starring Will My Wife is a Cheater Smith, is also based on the same book. However, since the novel predates the modern conception of the undead or viral outbreak zombie, which is credited to George A. Romero due to his Living Dead films, the air quotes zombies that appear in Matheson's I Am Legend novel, as well as the films based on it, are not outright referred to as zombies, even though they include some of the defining traits that could technically make them zombies. The same could be said of Romero's film The Crazies. In Matheson's I Am Legend novel, he instead refers to the undead as vampires, but unlike the traditional blood-sucking Count Dracula of Transylvania, or Marvel's daywalking slayer of his own kind, known as Blade, or even those sparkly pretty boys from Twilight that drove teenage girls into a frenzy in the mid to late 2000s,
Are you married?
No, Papa. Oh, Jesus.
You're not married?
No, Papa.
Who is Dolani?
My boyfriend.
Oh.
Matheson's vampires in I Am Legend are the result of a viral outbreak that came about due to the use of biological weapons in an imagined World War III between the world's superpowers that caused massive dust storms to carry an airborne plague that would trigger a global pandemic. Said pandemic would kill off majority of the population, but turn many of the infected survivors into vampires. But despite not exactly being zombies, Richard Matheson's book I Am Legend would go on to inspire much of the zombie-related media that would involve a viral outbreak or experimentation or use of biological and chemical weapons gone horribly wrong. Even in the films based off Matheson's book, like The Last Man on Earth and The Omega Man, the infected victims are not outright referred to as zombies, with them being called vampires or undead in The Last Man on Earth and mutants in The Omega Man. It was only until Will Crybaby Smith's movie I Am Legend where the infected more closely resembled the modern zombie. However, in that film as well, they were called Darkseekers rather than zombies. The trope of viral outbreak or biological and chemical mishap zombies, however, would continue in a wide number of films like Hell of the Living Dead, or in Italian, forgive my pronunciation, Virus, L'Inferno dei Morti Viventi from 1980 and directed by Italian director Bruno Mattei. Return of the Living Dead from 1985 by director Dan O'Brien and Peter Jackson's Brain Dead from 1992. Why do all the zombie movies from the late 20th century have dead or living dead in the title? The concept would evolve further in film with the introduction of the running infected zombie in movies like 28 Days Later. However, this wasn't the first movie to feature zombies with Sonic the Hedgehog abilities, with the first movie actually being yet another Italian B-horror film from 1980 titled Nightmare City, directed by Umberto Lenzi. Zombies would go on to populate almost every medium of entertainment, such as comic books and manga, novels, video games, animated productions in the form of cartoons and anime, and even escaping the horror genre and sometimes crossing over into other genres like comedy and romance, with two big examples being films like Zombieland and Warm Bodies, and maybe even to a certain degree the stop motion feature Corpse Bride, if we want to get super technical. But with all that being said regarding the massive popularity and cultural impact of zombies, one has to ask the question, where did it all start? As much as it is regarded as the very first zombie movie, 1932's The White Zombie is actually not the start of the iconic horror monster, with its roots actually going as far back as the early 1800s or maybe even earlier. To start off, much like its modern-day undead or virus-infected counterpart, the original concept of the zombie is that of a mythological undead corporeal revenant created through the reanimation of a corpse. The term actually comes from Haitian folklore, in which a zombie is a dead body reanimated through various methods, most commonly through magical practices in religions like Vodou, or better known as Voodoo. Whereas most modern media depictions of the reanimation of the dead often do not involve magic, but rather science-fictional methods such as fungi, radiation, gases, chemicals, diseases, plants, bacteria, viruses, etc. The English word zombie was first recorded in 1819 in a history of Brazil by the poet Robert Southey in the form of zombie, which is spelled as Z-O-M-B-I. At the time, it didn't include the letter E at the end of the word. Dictionaries trace the word's origin to African languages, relating to words connected to gods, ghosts, and souls. One of the first books to expose Western culture to the concept of the voodoo zombie was W.B. Seabrook's The Magic Island, which was published in 1929, which told the story of a narrator who encounters voodoo cults in Haiti and their resurrected thralls. a thrall being a medieval Scandinavian term used to describe a servant or slave and has its roots in the Viking slave trade of Northern Europe. In the case of Haitian Voodoo, the thralls or servants were often said to be resurrected dead people by means of witchcraft and magic. The Oxford English Dictionary gives the origin of the word as being from Central Africa and compares it to the Kikongo language words Nzambi, which means God, and Zumbi, which could mean fetish. A Kimbundu to Portuguese dictionary from 1903 defines the related word Nzumbi as soul, while a later Kimbundu Portuguese dictionary defines it as being a spirit that is supposed to wander the earth to torment the living. However, I'm not entirely sure of the sources I found while researching these words, since the articles I discovered about them are from a Western perspective. So anyone who may be familiar with the Kikongo language, please feel free to correct me in the comments below if the information regarding the meaning of these words is inaccurate. Sadly, there aren't many African sources online regarding zombies or undead servants, so I had to go with what I could find. How the creatures in contemporary zombie films came to be called zombies is not fully clear. The film Night of the Living Dead from 1968 made no spoken reference to its undead antagonists as zombies, describing them instead as ghouls. Though the word ghoul would derive from Arabic folklore, are rather imagined as demons or evil spirits and not undead beings. However, the term ghoul would end up also becoming another word used for the undead or resurrected corpses, such as in the Elder Scrolls game Skyrim, where the undead corpses of Nord warriors are called ghouls.
I've made a severe and continuous lapse in my judgment, and I don't expect to be forgiven. I'm simply here to apologize.
Get him up, let him get up, let him get up, let him get up.
Fight back! Fight back! Fight back!
Although George A. Romero used the term ghoul in his original scripts, in later interviews he used the term zombie. The word zombie is used exclusively by Romero in his script for his sequel, Dawn of the Dead, from 1978. According to Romero, film critics were influential in associating the term zombie to his creatures, and especially the French magazine Cahiers du Cinéma. Forgive me for my absolutely terrible French pronunciation, I do not speak French. He eventually accepted this linkage, even though he remained convinced at the time that zombies corresponded to the undead slaves of Haitian Voodoo as depicted in the previously mentioned 1932 film White Zombie, which itself was based on actual Haitian Voodoo folklore. Zombies are featured widely in Haitian folklore as dead persons physically revived by the act of necromancy of a bokor, which is a sorcerer or a witch. The bokor is opposed by the hungan, which is a priest, and the mambo, which is a priestess in the formal voodoo religion. A zombie remains under the control of a bokor as a personal slave having no will of its own. The Haitian tradition also includes an incorporeal or spiritual type of zombie, the zombie astral, which is a part of the human soul. A bokor can capture a zombie astral to enhance his spiritual power. A zombie astral can also be sealed inside a specially decorated bottle by a bokor and sold to a client to bring luck, healing, or business success. It is believed that God eventually will reclaim the zombie's soul, so the zombie is a temporary spiritual entity. The two types of zombie reflect soul dualism, a belief of the Bakongo religion of the Bakongo people in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and in Haitian Voodoo. Each type of legendary zombie is therefore missing one half of its soul, either the flesh or the spirit. The zombie belief has its roots and traditions brought to Haiti by enslaved Africans and their experiences in the New World. It was thought that the voodoo deity Baron Samedi would gather them from their grave to bring them to a heavenly afterlife, unless they had offended him in some way, in which case they would forever be a slave after death, as a zombie.
Welcome, Akuji. It seems that at least one member of your family has honor. I thank you for cleansing Coquitas of the dregs of your legacy.
Baron Samedi, although I come to request your charity, I do not suffer lightly your insults to the honor of my family.
Nor I your insolence. However, I can see that you are well-meaning, although perhaps misguided. The legacy that I refer to is one that has placed you in your current predicament. Your family, Akuji, is evil. They have always been evil. In death, their spirits taint the realms of the dead. I will strike a deal with you. If you cleanse the underworld of your ancestors, I will allow you to return to Mamora and save your precious Keisho.
English professor Amy Willens has written that the modern concept of zombies was strongly influenced by Haitian slavery. Slave drivers on the plantations, who were usually slaves themselves and sometimes voodoo priests, used the fear of zombification to discourage slaves from committing suicide, which would also be exploited by the plantation owners themselves in order to better control their slaves. As mentioned before, the folklore of the zombie was brought into Haiti from enslaved Africans that were sold to the French colonialists and slave traders during the 17th century and taken to their colonies in the Americas. One of those colonies being the previously mentioned Haiti, and was built off the harsh treatment that these slaves endured at the hands of their French plantation owners. The violence that defined Haiti was codified under the Code Noir, otherwise also known as the Black Code of 1724, which asserted French colonial rule in Haiti, shaped by the edicts of King Louis XIV of France in 1685 that limited religious freedoms and restricted freed African slaves. The Code Noir grew to include 60 articles that defined the rules governing Haitian plantation and slave life. The code itself was poorly enforced and there were few limits placed on physical punishment. The zombie developed as one way to represent the anxieties and fears of Haitians surrounding slavery and colonial rule. Zombies and zombification captured the fears surrounding sorcery, necromancy, and personal violence that defined colonial rule and the challenges facing the island's population. Zombies are a massive part of Haitian history and developed from beliefs that surround death and sorcery. Researchers looking for the origins of zombies outside of Haiti argue that it is rooted in the otherworldly creator deity Nzambi a Mpungu of the Luango, a Kikongo group living in Central Africa. There is also a strong connection to West and South African cultural traditions that included zombie-like creatures such as the Shidachane in Tsonga folklore and the Maduchwane in Venda folklore. However, once again, the sources I have found regarding this information seem to be mostly from a Western perspective, so any local Venda or Tsonga people, please feel free to correct me or point me to more accurate information in the comments below. Also, forgive me if my pronunciations are a bit off. Yes, I am a fellow South African, but the only vernac language I am familiar with is isiZulu, which ngikhuluma kancane, or I speak a little bit of since I am a native of KwaZulu-Natal, where the main Nguni language is Zulu. And besides, I think it's extremely difficult to know all 11 official languages of South Africa. So give me a break. Speaking of Zulu, there also exists within their traditional folklore a creature or being that could resemble the concept of the Haitian zombie. This being is referred to as umkovu and are essentially either the spirit or body of a deceased person that has been brought back from the dead by a witch or sorcerer. There's a bit of a mix-up regarding the translation of such people that practice dark magic, which is referred to as ugutagata in the Zulu language. In Zulu, there exist what could be best described as shamans or spiritual leaders called inyanga or sangoma. To some Western or English speakers, the mix-up is the thought that sangoma or inyanga are witch doctors, but this mistake is due to British colonial misconceptions and misunderstandings regarding the spiritual traditions of the Nguni people in southern Africa.
Dubula inyanga! And let me tell you, Dubula inyanga! That's exactly what we're gonna do!
I feeling.
The Nguni people being the collective name for some of the various ethnic groups within South Africa, like the Zulu, Xhosa and Ndebele people, etc. While yes, Sangoma and Inyanga do have the ability to practice ugutagata or witchcraft, their role within traditional South African society is rather to serve as both physical or spiritual healers with the use of natural herbs and plant-based medicines, as well as to act as mediators and maintain contact with one's ancestors in the spiritual realm. So for all you foreigners out there, the most relatable term I could use would be that of a shaman or medicine man. Any Sangoma or Inyanga that does choose to practice witchcraft is usually shunned by their community, with the actual Zulu term for a witch or sorcerer that exclusively practices dark magic being umtagati. At least that's according to my Zulu friends. I'm just a simple ignorant white boy who, despite being born and raised in South Africa, is too afraid of witchcraft to obtain any deeper information about it due to some really spooky incidents I've had over the course of my life, which still confuse me to this day. Kinda ironic, I know, since here I am telling you about zombies and its African witchcraft origins. Who needs sleep anyway?
I don't need it. I don't need it. I definitely don't need it. I don't need it. I don't need it.
Just another disclaimer though, if I got any of this wrong or maybe understood something, again, please feel free to correct me in the comments or point me in the right direction. The fear of cursed possession and of the undead arrived in the Caribbean as mentioned earlier with enslaved Africans, and took many forms including that of the Jumbi, a malevolent ghost or spirit of the dead that brought together African, Amerindian, Dutch, and English mythologies. Once in Haiti, the Jumbi and its association with death, possession, and slavery transformed into becoming the zombie. Zombification itself would always remain a threat, and the fear of zombification was one route through which colonial rulers controlled African slaves. These mindless beings or decaying corpses that lived only consumed the flesh of others. They were beings condemned to work the plantations for eternity. The enslaved believed that death would free them back to Africa, but they were not allowed to take their own life, for if they did, they would become a soulless zombie, trapped forever as an undead body and work the plantation as an undead being. They did not consume the flesh of others like is often depicted in modern zombie horror films. The possible misconception of this could be due to the fact that a small handful of African tribes, such as the Azande from the Congo, did at one point in history practice cannibalism during times of war or famine. But then again, cannibalism has existed in rare occasions all over the world, even in Europe and Asia, as recently as the 19th century whenever starvation was rampant. An ancient European civilization, however, called the Magdalenians, for example, that existed around 14,000 years ago, was shown to have engaged in ritual cannibalism, as well as the Aztecs of Mesoamerica. It wasn't until the Haitian Revolution between 1803 and 1804 that the folklore of the zombie was woven into voodoo religion. The myth evolved into the belief that zombies were living undead, reanimated by shamans and voodoo priests. Sorcerers known as Bokor were known to revive the dead, to do the Bokor's tasks or labor. Haitians feared enslavement at the hands of a Bokor, but as mentioned earlier, just like how South Africa has its Sangoma and Inyanga as the good guys when it comes to dealing with witchcraft, in Haiti there also exists the Hungan or the Mambo, which are priests and priestesses within voodoo religion, who could be turned to for help regarding spiritual matters or dark magic. Note that I am using the word voodoo rather than vodou for the Haitian and Caribbean religion, because voodoo is unfortunately the one that most people are familiar with, but I do understand that to the followers of the faith it is more accurately called vodou. It was believed that salt could free a zombie, so the Bokor had to keep the zombie's food bland and tasteless. If a zombie under Bokor control tasted salt, life would return to their bodies and they would be free. Good food was equated to freedom, which explains why Haitian food is considered some of the best cuisine in the world. I wouldn't know, however, because I've never traveled abroad to experience it for myself. In my personal opinion, Durban food is the best. Nobody makes curry, biryani, shisanyama, and amagwinya or fat cooked the way we do, so suck it, Johannesburg and Cape Town. To this day in Haiti, people suffering from mental illnesses are often believed to be zombies or bewitched in some way, kind of like how in other nations where psychosis or mental illnesses were confused with demonic possession in the past. Even after the country's independence in 1804 and the end of slavery, Haitians still feared zombification. The Bokor or sorcerer was the main focus of concern. The man or woman who could magically conjure the zombie and possess an innocent victim to take the place of slaves on Haitian sugar plantations held dangerous power over the newly independent nation.
What do I do, Lord? Destroy the child, corrupt them all.
The fear of zombification and the unchallenged power of the Bokor haunts Haitians right into modern times, as is also evidenced by past Haitian dictators like Francois Duvalier, also known as Papa Doc, due to the belief that he may have been a powerful Bokor that engaged in dark magic, due to the iron grip he held on the nation and his frenzied supporters who bought into his populist politics. Papa Doc would exert his brutal and bloody regime over the Haitian people from 1957 until his death in 1971. So one can see how the concept of dark magic, witchcraft and the zombie even influences Haitian politics to this day, with Haiti currently in a state of extreme civil unrest and violence since 2018, due to rival gangs gaining immense political power in the vacuum of a largely ineffective government. Because of this, the stories of dark voodoo magic and witchcraft have begun to circulate once again. The voodoo religion would also find its way to the United States, particularly in the state of Louisiana and the city of New Orleans, which was also a French colony from 1682 to 1762, when it was taken over by the Spanish after the French lost the 7 Years' War. However, Spain would return control of the colony back to France in 1801, which France would then give to the still fairly newly established United States in 1803. So best believe that both the Spanish and the French brought over slaves from Africa and their colonies in the Caribbean to the colony of Louisiana. And that is most likely how the religion of Vodou found its way to North America, with one really famous figure being Marie Catherine Laveau, who would expand further on the Haitian religion together with other practitioners by including some of the Christian elements found in the Catholic faith, since majority of the population of Louisiana at the time were devout Roman Catholics. But there are also traces of this existing in Haitian voodoo, since Haiti was once a French colony, and the French were no doubt very staunch Catholics. So African slaves living on the colony would find ways to combine the Catholic faith with their former African beliefs in order to appease their slave masters. One of the most significant events in the history of Vodou is the Boy Cayman ceremony of 1791, often cited as a catalyst for the Haitian slave revolution. According to legend, Vodou practitioners gathered in the forest of Boy Cayman to call upon the spirits and seek their support in the fight against slavery. This event symbolizes the deep connection between Vodou, resistance, and the quest for freedom. The revolution would end with the victory of the slaves under the leadership of renowned rebel military leader Toussaint L'Ouverture. Forgive my French.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
Who then sent the French running with their tail between their legs, as history has shown them to do on multiple occasions, cough cough, World War II, and worked towards ending slavery and gaining independence for Haiti. So despite all the spooky business with zombies and witchcraft, do not be mistaken in thinking that Haitian or Louisiana voodoo is a religion of dark and occult practice. Like all religions, it has an emphasis on good versus evil. The practices of the Bokors are most certainly considered as evil and are usually shunned by voodoo practitioners. Voodoo, or Vodou as is more accurately known, is a complex and rich spiritual tradition deeply rooted in the history and culture of Haiti. Misunderstood and often sensationalized by Western media, Vodou is far more than the stereotypes of black magic, voodoo dolls, zombies, or sinister rituals that have permeated popular culture. In reality, it is a religion that fosters community, provides moral guidance, and serves as a source of strength for millions of people, both in Haiti and in the Haitian diaspora communities around the world. A brief summary on the structure and beliefs of Vodou is as follows. Followers of Vodou believe in a pantheon of high spiritual beings, being called the Loa. The Loa being the most prominent figures in Vodou practice, and are often compared to saints in Catholicism. The followers of Voodoo also believe in a supreme god or deity called Bon Dieu, who is seen as the creator of everything and the source of universal order, and could most likely be a combination of both the Christian god and elements of various created deities found within African religious belief systems. Bon Dieu is considered a remote god, and he uses the Loa, spirits that interact with the Vaudouisants or Voodoo followers, for direct interaction and communication or relationship with humanity. Very similar to the idea of the Christian God interacting with his followers through the saints, angels, or Holy Spirit, as is seen in the various Catholic and Protestant denominations found within Christianity. Each Loa has a unique personality, domain, and set of responsibilities, and they are associated with specific aspects of life, nature, and human behavior. For example, Papa Legba is the gatekeeper to the spirit world and is invoked at the beginning of ceremonies to open the way for communication with other spirits. Erzuli Freda is the spirit of love and beauty and is often associated with matters of the heart. While Ogo is a Loa of war, power, and strength, whereas the previously mentioned Baron Samedi is the Loa of the dead, as it is believed that he guides the recently deceased to the underworld or afterlife. Vodou practitioners believe that the Loa can offer guidance, protection, healing, and wisdom. In return, followers honor the Loa with rituals, offerings, and celebrations. These offerings might include food, rum, candles, or objects that are dear to the spirit, depending on their individual preferences. Rituals can involve drumming, singing, dancing, and spirit possession, during which the Loa temporarily inhabit the bodies of participants to offer advice or aid. Similar to how in Christianity, people can often be touched by the spirit and start praying in tongues, or in Hinduism, practitioners can sometimes go into a state of trance. A key belief in Vodou is the concept of dual souls, Grossborn Ange or Great Good Angel, and T-Born Ange or Little Good Angel. The T-Born Ange represents an individual's personality and consciousness, while the Grossborn Ange is a person's life force or spiritual energy. Vodou emphasizes maintaining balance and harmony between these two aspects with the support of the Loa. Vodou is not simply a religion of ritual, it is a way of life that permeates the daily experiences of its followers. It offers a moral framework, social structure, and a means of understanding the world. Vodou teaches the importance of community, family, and respect for both the living and the dead. Many rituals center around honoring ancestors who are believed to play an ongoing role in guiding and protecting their descendants. Much like many of the African-based traditions and cultural beliefs that exist here in Southern Africa, the religion also plays a central role in healing practices. Vodou priests are known as Hungans for men and Mambos for women, which serve as spiritual leaders, healers, and counselors. They use herbal remedies, prayers, and spiritual rituals to treat both physical and emotional or mental ailments. Vodou also places a strong emphasis on the interconnectedness of the spiritual and physical worlds, so healing practices often involve appeasing or communicating with the Loa to resolve issues. In addition to its spiritual significance, Vodou serves as a source of social cohesion in Haiti, a country that has faced centuries of political instability, poverty, and natural disasters. Vodou has provided a sense of cultural identity and resilience. It fosters a sense of community and mutual support, helping people navigate the challenges of daily life. And that, my friends, concludes today's video on the topic of the horror movie monster called Zombies and its voodoo origins. I hope you all found this video interesting, and again, if I have gotten anything wrong, please do correct me in the comments below and perhaps share some links to better sources of information. As with every video, however, I will also provide the links to where I got my information from in the description box beneath this video, in case anyone would like to do some further reading or fact checking. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Stay tuned for more episodes of the 8-Bit Academic. Until next time, see ya.
Oh, you are the problem?
Yes.
Why are you the problem?
I think that there's no need for me to explain why I'm the problem. That tells me that I am the problem.
Now I'm not here for any other issues. I just need to know where are the pods. That's all I need to know.
Where are the pods?
Yeah.
There's no pods because I made the things that it cannot make that pod to be done.
I don't know if anybody understands.